The storm came not from the heavens, but from the mountains. Clouds rolled down like armies, black and swollen with thunder, smothering the Spanish countryside in restless shadow. By dusk, rain lashed the turrets of Aragon Castle, its stones groaning with the weight of centuries, as though bracing for some calamity yet unseen. Within those walls, Julian de Vera, the Virgin Duke of Aragon, stood before the great hearth of his chamber, firelight catching on his pale features. He was a man of 27, proud in posture though his body bore the frailty of a childhood malady. His cane, carved of dark walnut and silver, leaned against his chair, constant reminder of a limp that made him despise pity. The people whispered that he had never touched a woman, that though dukes before him had sired heirs and filled their halls with laughter, Julian's line threatened to wither. Some mocked him as a saintly relic, others as a man unworthy of desire. He bore it in silence, his heart hidden behind shutters thicker than the castle walls. But storms, as history knows, never strike by chance. She came with the tempest, Isabella Montoya, daughter of a disgraced knight who had gambled away his fortune and honor. She arrived drenched, her cloak heavy with rain, her carriage abandoned in the mire outside the gates. The guards would have turned her away, yet the Duke himself, restless, had ordered the doors open when the knock came, as though fate had stirred him from solitude. Her face, when lifted to his gaze, stole his breath. She was no courtly lady wrapped in silks, but a woman of unstudied grace, dark eyes fierce with pride, lips trembled not by fear but defiance. Her gown was torn by branches, her hands scraped from the road, yet she curtsied as though she still commanded a throne. "I seek shelter, my lord," she said, voice low but steady. "Only for the night. The storm will not let me pass." Julian's eyes lingered too long. He gave the order for her to be received, though he knew well what tongues would wag should a ruined knight's daughter sleep beneath his roof. Nobility was a cruel judge, and his council, already pressing him to wed for alliance, would brand her a scandal. Yet something in her presence, the fire that met his stillness, pierced through years of hollow restraint. That night, the castle seemed alive with whispers. Servants carried trays with furtive glances, guards exchanged murmurs by torchlight, and in the halls, thunder echoed like drums of war. Julian dined with Isabella in a chamber reserved for private company, where tapestries of saints watched with solemn eyes. She told him little of her journey, less of her fall from grace. But she laughed softly when he confessed he seldom had company at table. "And yet," she said, lifting her goblet with a daring smile, "you pour the wine as though you have done so for a queen." He flushed, unpracticed in such intimacy, and shifted his gaze to the fire. "Perhaps I pour for the storm itself. For it brought you here." Their silence after was not empty. It was charged, restless, like the sky outside waiting to break. Later, when she retired, he stood long at his window, watching lightning fracture the night. His hands trembled against the cane at his side, for he knew, he had let in more than a traveler. He had let in a tempest to his heart. And storms do not rest until they claim their due. Days turned to weeks, for the rains did not cease. Roads flooded, bridges washed away, and travelers spoke of villages drowned beneath the torrents. Aragon Castle became an island adrift in a sea of mud, cut off from the world. Isabella remained within its walls, no longer a guest but something unnamed. Julian told himself her presence was necessity. She could not leave. To send her forth would be to condemn her. Yet in the stillness of dawn, when he passed her in the courtyard with her skirts gathered above the wet stones, laughter spilling as she played with the hounds, he knew the truth. He wanted her near. He avoided her at first, burying himself in affairs of state, but she found him. She came to the library, where dust lay thick on tomes none but he had touched, and asked him to read aloud. She followed him to the stables, fearless of the stallions that even the grooms handled with caution. She drew him out of shadows he had made his prison. But desire is never content with stolen moments. One evening, the storm relented just enough to reveal a pale moon. Isabella found him in the chapel, kneeling before the altar of Saint Teresa. His hands gripped his cane tight, his head bowed, yet his prayer was not piety but torment. "Why do you hide?" she asked, stepping softly between the pillars. He stiffened, rising with difficulty. "This place is sacred. You should not disturb it." "And you?" she countered, eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Do you pray to be delivered from me?" Her boldness struck him like lightning. He turned, voice hoarse. "You know not what you speak. I have sworn to my people, to God, that I would wed only for alliance. My house hangs by a thread. One wrong step, and centuries of honor fall into ruin." She came closer, unflinching. "And is honor worth a life unlived?" He faltered, breath quickening, for her nearness was more dangerous than any sword. He could smell the rain in her hair, see the flush upon her cheeks. His hand twitched as though to reach for her, Yet he gripped the cane instead, the weight of duty anchoring him.
"You tempt me to sin," he whispered.
"And if sin feels more holy than your prayers?" The silence between them throbbed, heavy with the forbidden. And in that silence, Julian broke. His hand lifted, trembling, and brushed her cheek with the gentleness of a man touching flame.
She did not draw away.
Her eyes closed, her lips parted, and when he bent, his mouth found hers with the hunger of years denied. The kiss was no courtly vow, no rehearsed courtesy. It was desperate, raw, a clash of storm and stone. His cane clattered to the floor, forgotten. She held him steady, her hands gripping his shoulders as though to keep him from drowning. When they parted, breathless, both knew what had been unleashed could never be caged again. But love born in shadows must pay its price. Rumors spread swift as fire. A servant swore he saw the Duke's hand linger too long upon Isabella's. Another claimed her chamber door opened at hours indecent. By the week's end, Elvira de Castile, cousin to the Queen and Julian's intended by Council's decree, arrived at the castle with a retinue of spies and priests. She confronted Julian before the court, her voice cold as steel. "You dishonor your house," she accused. "A crippled duke may be forgiven for weakness of body, but not weakness of virtue. You would throw away alliances for a fallen knight's daughter? For a storm-tossed harlot?" Julian's face burned with shame, rage, and something deeper, fear. He saw Isabella standing at the hall's edge, chin lifted though her hands shook. He could not deny his heart. But neither could he speak it aloud. To do so would condemn them both. So he stood in silence, and the storm within him raged. The council gathered at dawn. Torches guttered in the damp air, shadows dancing upon walls where ancestors stared down from oil portraits, their eyes full of judgment. Elvira demanded Isabella's banishment. The priests called her presence a temptation from the devil. Some nobles whispered of imprisonment, others of exile beyond the borders of Aragon. Julian sat at the head, hands white upon the arms of his chair. His cane lay across his lap, heavy as the crown he bore. When Isabella was brought forth, chains at her wrists, the hall fell silent. She walked with dignity, though her face was pale. The Duke's heart clenched at the sight. "Speak," Elvira commanded. "Confess your sin before God and men. Admit you seduced the Duke for your own gain." Isabella's eyes turned not to Elvira but to Julian. For a heartbeat, they stood as though alone, the hall vanishing. Then, voice steady, she said, "I confess nothing. If love is a crime, then it is not mine alone." Gasps rippled through the court. Elvira's lips curled in triumph, certain this would damn her. Yet Julian rose, cane striking the floor with a thunderous crack. "Enough." His voice rang through the chamber, stronger than any had heard. "You call me virgin as though it were mockery. You call me cripple as though it were shame. Yet know this, I am Duke of Aragon, and I will not let others dictate the measure of my honor. This woman has brought more truth to these halls than any of you who slither in shadows." Elvira's face blanched, but Julian pressed on, his eyes never leaving Isabella's. "If to love her is to betray my house, then let the house fall. If to claim her is to damn my soul, then let it burn. For I will not live a life unlived." The hall erupted, voices clashing in outrage and disbelief. Yet over it all, Isabella's tears glimmered, not of despair, but of fierce, unyielding love. That night, as thunder rolled again over the hills, Julian and Isabella stood upon the battlements, the storm winds whipping their cloaks. The future was uncertain. Enemies gathered like wolves, alliances crumbled, and exile or war might await. But in that moment, beneath the furious heavens, they were free. He took her hand, pressed it to his lips, and whispered, "The storm reached me, Isabella. And I will never let it pass." The rain fell in sheets, drowning the torches below, and their figures were swallowed by the tempest, two souls bound, not by destiny's chains, but by the fire they had dared to kindle against the world. And so ended the tale of the Virgin Duke, and the storm that claimed his heart.